We left off the last time with Athens. We're starting with, we left off with Sparta. All right, Athens. In the case of Athens, their written history begins around 700 BCE when they started writing, and what we find when the light of history, you might say, turns on, the city is in chaos. There was the laws were said to be draconian. Now, we don't know if ever existed. Some people believe that Draco was just the Greek word for snake, but some people said that under Draco's laws, if a person was caught stealing a loaf of bread, he could be killed. But again, all that's speculation. But we've come to a man who was able to reform, a man named Solon. Now, some people believe that Solon had been to Egypt, and in fact, the next page over talks about foreign influence. Yes?
I don't know if it's too much trouble, but would you mind, like, when you write the names up there, just put the page numbers down?
Listen, if you're following along in the book, like you're supposed to, the page I'm on is page 100. It is a little bit of extra trouble for me. I mean, I'm more interested in, if you want to know the page number, again, page 100, and most of you have your book open. Congratulations. But anyway, I'll move on. Anyway, I'm going to go over Solon rather quickly. There's a problem that the Greeks had. They would sometimes get into debt. Now, they didn't have banks as we have, so what they do is the poor man would go to his rich neighbor and borrow money, and the rich man would say, why do you want to use this collateral? Say, well, if I don't pay back, I'll either make my son or my daughter your slave, or I'll become your slave. They used humans as collateral. And after a while, a lot of Greeks found themselves enslaved because they couldn't pay their debts. Solon came along and he gave reforms that the rich were hoping that he would rule in their favor, the poor were hoping to rule in their favor. The bottom line is some of his reforms favored the rich and some favored the poor, and neither side liked him until he got gone. And once he was gone, the people of Athens looked back and said, hey, we had it really great under him. Wasn't it wonderful when Solon was our archon? But until he got gone, the people did not really appreciate it. Now, another thing he did not do that the rich liked, the poor didn't like, down through the ages, there's been a tendency for land to find its way in the hands of a few owners. Now keep in mind, 90% of the people were farmers, maybe a few more, higher percent than that. So everything was measured by how much land you owned. Well, a person might fall on hard times, become ill, and have to sell his land to his rich neighbor. And then the rich neighbor would get richer and richer. I mean, there's an old saying, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and there is a lot of truth to that. After a while, a few landowners had all the land, and your average farmer was put out of business. Now, to keep that from happening in our country, we have a law that a person who owns more land than he works is taxed real heavily. And a person who owns land he's not living on is taxed. Now, if you ever buy a house, one of the first things you want to do is go to the courthouse and get what's called a residence exemption. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Where that if you can prove you reside in that house, they'll greatly reduce your taxes, property taxes. But if you don't reside in it, they're going to jump your property taxes sky high. Same with farmers. You get a farmer's exemption for the property you're farming and you pay a low tax. Get if the county finds out you're not farming that land, they're going to jack the tax way up. It gives you incentive to get rid of houses and property that you're not living in. Anyway, the poor wanted Solon to take the extra lands from the rich and redistribute them. Now, folks, this has been done several times throughout history. In fact, it's been less than 100 years ago when Mexico, they were the South, it is. A dictator took over and he took a bunch of land from the rich. The Koreans did it. The Chinese, a few Chinese dynasties did it. And in every case where it's been tried, it has not worked. Why not? Something Abraham Lincoln said, one way you don't increase the wealth of your people is to impoverish the rich. Now, folk, you might think of the rich as being snakes. Perhaps they are. But I attended a snake show one time, and a man said, we're killing our snakes too fast. Our automobiles are running over them. But he said, once they're gone, as much as we hate it, we'll miss them when they're gone. The communists have found out the hard way. You destroy the wealthy, and you destroy everybody else. As far as the rich goes, the richer the rich get, the richer I'll get. I say more power to them, let them get all the wealth they want. Because as they get richer, I'll get richer with them. There's a certain kind of crab in Latin America. I've heard this story several times, where if you put one crab in a bushel basket, he'll crawl out. But the natives put dozens of crabs in a basket and never put a lid on the basket. When one tries to crawl out, the other ones pull him down, and none of them get out. Solon was wise enough to not redistribute the land. He did eliminate using humans as collateral for debt. Basically, he said that all persons who have been subject to collateral and enslaved by collateral are free. And if he said in the future you may not use collateral as debt. This pleased the poor, did not necessarily please the rich. Basically, took a little bit of both sides. Well, the poor people resented him. Solon, after a while, got tired of public life and retired. And what he did not want to happen, but what did, was a strong man took over, Pisistratus. Pisistratus took over and became a tyrant. He seized the power. He remained popular with the merchants because he increased Athenian trade. I mean, the city of Athens is located right on the sea. This is going to become very important. Athens is located right on the sea coast where they have a really good harbor. He encouraged trade. And as was a case of so many strong men, he died probably of old age, and left the throne to his son. I say throne, left the power to his son. His son could not hold on to it. The people rebelled against him, and that ended that dynasty after just 2 generations. The next reformer was Cleisthenes. There's only going to be 4 of these men whose names are put down. Anyway, Cleisthenes. Now, he was the one who did more than anyone else to turn Athens toward democracy. He set up a council called the Council of 500. Now, you're going to be hearing more about this Council of 500 in a little bit. "500 men who were chosen to be on the council." The council was called the Ecclesia, and I'm not going to ask you to learn that name, but from the word Ecclesia, we get our modern word church. But it basically was a group of people, 500 men, and yes, I did say men, who got together and decided on the issues facing Athens. Now, the Council of 500 got a really bad name because later we're going to learn it was this same council that condemned Socrates to death. And one of the things that was eventually to give democracy in particular a bad name. Debate swung votes. Anyone who could get up and make a really effective speech might sway the council. I'll talk more about rhetoric and oratory in a few minutes, or maybe next class. Now, something else Cleisthenes did. The people of Athens were divided into tribal loyalties, but after hundreds of years, some tribes became really, really large, and some tribes were small. Cleisthenes said, forget about your family tribal loyalties. I want everybody to pull, you might say, their name out of a straw hat. I mean, I'm not saying it's literally a straw hat. He said, I'm going to divide every one of you into 10 tribes, and all 10 tribes be equal in size. And you'll be chosen by your tribe by sheer random. So basically, by a sheer random process, Every man in Athens was divided into one of the 10 tribes until they had 10 tribes were nearly equal. And this supposedly made for the more powerful were not able to swallow up the weaker ones because there was no powerful tribes anymore. Everybody's loyalty was now to be to their tribe and not to their family. Your book digresses here to talk about the influence of foreign influence. And I want to say this about foreign influence. I think that Greek culture was strongly influenced by Egypt. That Solon is believed to have gone to Egypt. Socrates, who we'll talk about later, probably went to Egypt. Pythagoras, with the famous Pythagorean theorem, is suspected of having gone to Egypt. And several others, and they probably talked to Egyptian initiates. And they came home and taught the people what they learned in Egypt, with the result that Egyptian influence found its way into Greek culture. Your book shows a statue on page 101. The one on the right was from Egypt, the one on the left from Greece. Strongly influenced. All right.